something for you to take notes on, if you so desire. You don't have to. It just, because I'm not going to have the notes up on the screen, but I will be emphasizing what the points will be. So if you'd like to take notes, you can do that as they're passing it around. Give it a second. Is that good? Ran out. Sharing is caring. Take notes, both of you at once. That's funny. All right. That should be good. So, first I want to say thank you to Wes for allowing me the opportunity to preach. I really appreciate it. So thank you. And then I want to say thank you for you all for coming. I really enjoy preaching, and it's a big passion for me, and I really like it. And so I'm hoping to really take the most of this opportunity that I've been given. So if you want to go ahead and open up to Colossians chapter 1, that's where we're going to be camping out today. So just to kind of give a heads up on where we're going this month, I'm going to get to preach the entire month of Sunday nights. So you're stuck with me, at least for now. So we're going to be going through Colossians, and the theme that we're going to be hitting on is living the Christian life. We're going to get hitting the points throughout Colossians and seeing what has to do with this theme. So, has anyone seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Anyone? Okay, if you haven't, I'll catch you up real quick. Ferris Bueller's a senior in high school about to graduate, and he is determined to have one final last day where he can do whatever he wants. And so Ferris Bueller fakes being sick to his parents. His parents come into his room, and he's, cuddled up under the covers. I don't feel so good, and he's trying to fake it as best he can to make sure that he will have this opportunity at this last day to have all that he can do. And so Ferris tricks his parents. He talks to his best friend and his girlfriend, and they're going to skip with him. So Ferris Bueller goes to his friend, and he's like, hey, come pick me up because he can't drive. And his friend has a car, he picks him up, and he goes back. And then he's like, hey, we should take your dad's Ferrari. And he's like, no, my dad will kill me. And he's like, no, I've got to take it. They end up taking the Ferrari. They have, the coolest day ever. I wish I could have one of these days. They take the Ferrari to Chicago. It was a good time, it looked like. Chicago, they went to the restaurant, a really fancy restaurant, and Ferris pulled a fast one on him, acting like he was an important person, and he got a reserved table. He went to a Cubs game, caught a foul ball, and then, this is the coolest part to me, and this is my favorite part in the whole movie. He went to this parade that Chicago was holding, and he led the entire city in Twist and Shout. Does anyone know that song? Twist and shout. Okay? He led the entire city through this dance, and it was the coolest thing ever. The point I want to make with Ferris Bueller's Day Off is that throughout the entire movie, Ferris Bueller was in complete control. Everything was going his way. He left no stone unturned. And there was no limit to what he was going to do that day. And he did all that he set out to do. Even more so, Jesus Christ is supreme over everything. That's what we're going to be looking at today. And first, I just want to comment real quick. The goal of today is to introduce or reintroduce, maybe for those of you who might have heard of it before, the concept of Jesus as supreme over everything. The thing is that sometimes I think that we look at Jesus as the guy that we go to when we need something from him, instead of looking at him as who he is which is supreme over everything, including our own lives. And so before we get into it, I want to just look at a little bit of background on Colossians. So the author was Paul. He wrote the book of Colossians in about 60 to 61 AD. Okay, two purposes that he wrote the book for was to combat the Colossian heresy, which was a false teaching that was going on at the church at Colossae. And then his other goal was to exalt the person of Jesus Christ and urge the Colossians to give up anything that denied Jesus his preeminent position as Lord. So kind of just a one-sentence summary of Colossians. I know you're all reading it with me. Jesus Christ is supreme Lord of the universe and head of the church, and therefore he is the only one through whom forgiveness is possible, making legal obligations or philosophical studies irrelevant in matters of salvation. So that's the background that we're going to need for getting into what's going on today. And real quick, before we jump in, I just want to take a quick moment to pray that God would open up the Scriptures to our hearts. Bow with me. Dear Jesus, I pray that you would just illuminate and enlighten what we're going to be listening to, and I pray that you would just pierce hearts. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So we're going to be talking about the supremacy of the Son. And we're going to be looking at three things in the text. The first thing we're going to look at is the Son over creation. Starting in verse 15, Colossians chapter 1. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Pause. So the first thing we're looking at is that the Son is supreme over creation. So as we read, the Son is the image of the invisible God. We have to determine what the image is, right? What does that mean? An image is a visible expression of what it is trying to express. So the Son as a visible image, or an image, is a visible expression of what he is trying to express, which is God. This is important because it clarifies something key. Invisible, right? We can't look up into the sky and see a grandfather-like figure with the long flowing hair, white hair, with a beard. Like, we can't look up into the sky and see that, because that's not who God is, and that's not what he's like. He is immaterial, beyond anything in time or space. He is above it all. Which is hard, because we can't fully comprehend that. God is not something that we can fully comprehend. Let me give you an example. Can a 2D image, a drawing, understand what it's like to be a 3D object? No. Of course not. It can barely, if at all, comprehend the possibility that there's something above it. Us as human beings can hardly comprehend fully that there's something above what we experience right now. In the same way that a 2D image can't fully understand what a 3D image would be. So this is why it's important and appropriate that God provided a way for us to know him. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. This is why the Son came to earth, so that we might have a chance to enter into a relationship with God. So he's the image of the invisible God. He's the firstborn over all creation. So firstborn here doesn't mean that Jesus was born from the Father. The Son, he can't be born from the Father. That's not how that worked. It can't be how that worked. It may look like I'm reading, I just don't want to get this part wrong. If he was created, that means he is not equal with the Father. if he is not equal with the Father, there has to be some kind of hierarchy among the Trinity. If there's a hierarchy among the Trinity, that means that one would have to have more power than the other. If one has more power than the other, or if the Father has more power than the Son could not be fully God because God is omnipotent. Which just means that he's all-powerful. And Jesus is God. What firstborn means, it signifies authority. Firstborn over all creation. Over all being the firstborn. Right? He wasn't born of God. Like at some point that he didn't exist. He is over all. So he's over all creation. The firstborn. He is creator. In Genesis 1, it wasn't just the Father doing the work. Like it's not like Jesus and the Holy Spirit were chilling over here and they're like, "You're doing good work over there, Father. It looks like it's going well from our vantage point. We're going to keep playing cards over here." That's not what was happening in Genesis 1. All three were equally and fully involved in the process. He's creator. A good way to maybe say this is that the Father was creating through the Son by the Spirit. Differentiating, but still all together. So then we look at this list of things, right? Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. So this list of things, in heaven and on earth, etc., shows that the Son is over all. All of these things are below him. The Son is supreme. Kind of a quick side point, the thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, when this comes up in the Bible, in this particular language, it almost always means angelic, demonic beings, the spiritual beings that are on the earth, over the earth, invisible. So he's over even the angels. He's over even the demons. He is over sin and he is over death. He's for sure over us. The Son is supreme over creation. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The Son is God, and he has power over all. So the next thing is that he's also a sustainer. Right? In verse 17, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So when someone makes a fire, right, if you were to make a fire right here, and you didn't want it to go out, you would take the steps necessary to make sure that it didn't go out, right? You would give it a firm foundation. You'd make sure that there wasn't any rain coming. You'd protect it from the rain. You'd make sure it had the amount of fuel that it needed. Give it wood. In the same way, God created the universe. There had to be something bringing it together. The Son. Supreme over all. So what are we supposed to do with this? Like, what do I do with this practically? I know that's a lot of the times the question I ask. Like, okay, that's cool info, but like, what am I supposed to do with it? 2 Corinthians 5:15 says, "And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." Our purpose in life is to glorify God. To do this, we must be doing the work of God. To be doing the work of God, Christ has to be at the center. Our lives need to be centered around the Son. To center our lives around the Son, we must be in the Word, we must be in prayer, and we must be seeking the things in his will. So I'm going to hit that again. We must be in the Word. We must be in prayer. We must be seeking the will of God. We must be doing His work. So we know the Son is supreme because He is over creation. Now we're going to look at Him being supreme over the church. So verse 18. And He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything He might have the supremacy. Because the Son is God, He is head of the church. That makes sense, I think. Yeah? Because He is God, He is over the church, supreme over it. Without Christ as the head, the church would not be able to function. Big picture goals are accomplished when a lot of people are looking at the same goal and moving in the same direction. It's part of the reason the early church was so effective. All of them together had this overall goal in mind. And they went after it, every one of them. The goal being to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. All of them together. Big picture at once. We're moving in tandem, as a body should. So, kind of to give another illustration, for any great offensive football team, you have to have a good quarterback, right? You don't see very many good offensive teams without someone over it who can lead them in the way that they need to go. In football, this is the quarterback. The quarterback is head of the offense. Everything goes through him, and he is the kernel of what's going on in front of him, right? The coach can't go and play for them and tell them right behind them what to do. The quarterback has to be the one who is leading it. So if you've ever seen Remember the Titans, I'm a big movie guy, by the way. I love movies. If you've ever seen Remember the Titans, there's this moment where the starting quarterback, Rev, breaks his wrist. He breaks his wrist, and so Coach Boone, who's the head coach, is standing here, and he's just looking. And they tell him, Coach, he's not coming back. He's not a quarterback. Ronnie Bass, backup QB. Coach, he's going back in, right? Rev's all right? Not a quarterback, son. And he looks at him. Ronnie Bass, backup QB. Ronnie Bass looks at him. Coach, I can't do it. I can't make that pitch. I can't do it. Coach Boone looks at him. So, Ronnie, when I was 15, my mother and father died in the same month. Same month. I was 15 years old, 12 brothers and sisters, and I was the youngest one. And they needed me. They were all looking at me. Your team needs you tonight. You're the colonel. You are in charge, and this is your time. He sends them out. Ronnie Bass wins the game. They go to the state championship, and they win. In the same way that Ronnie Bass, in Remember the Titans, was head over his team, he was the quarterback. In a really similar manner, the Son is the quarterback, the head of the church. He's also the beginning and the firstborn of the dead. So we're going to look at the parallels here. I think that the beginning, in verse 18, and he is the head of the body of the church, he is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. I think that the beginning refers to Genesis 1. He is the beginning. He existed before time even began. Preeminence, that's what that means. Before time. Before this. He is the beginning. He's also the firstborn from among the dead. So we talked about firstborn just a little bit ago, talking about how the firstborn in this instance meant authority. the Son has authority over the beginning, and he has authority over the end. He's the head of the church, the firstborn from among the dead. He's supreme over it all. So what do we take from that? Well, if the Son is supreme over everything, how much more we as the church, how much more are we under him in his supremacy? When we confess Jesus as Savior and Lord, how much more are we underneath him in his supremacy? I think that this means being able to give up our time, our relationships, what we think about, our habits. I think this means total and complete surrender to the King of Kings, who is supreme over all. We need to be giving him everything in our lives. Everything. Holding nothing back from the Son. So we saw the Son's supremacy over creation. We saw the Son's supremacy over the church. Now we're going to look at the Son's supremacy over the cross. Starting in verse 19. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Okay, so we've got to be really careful here. So it says that for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. That's a big statement. What this is talking about is the incarnation. If you don't know what that means, it means that Jesus was at the same time 100% human and 100% God. Remember when we were talking about how we can't fully comprehend God? This is one of those times where we just won't understand completely what's happening here, the incarnation. But that doesn't mean we should shy away from it either. Like, oh man, I'm never going to get that. I guess I just won't think about it. Oh, someone asked me about it yesterday. Man, I don't know. Sounded right. We don't want to shy away from this topic either. So, we talked about John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we know he has to be God. He also has to be human. So one way to maybe wrap our minds around this a little bit will be to recognize why it had to be this way. If Jesus wasn't 100% human, there couldn't be reconciliation. So for instance, if Jesus didn't have a human mind, then at the cross, we wouldn't be able to have redemption in our minds. If Jesus didn't have a human body, then at the cross, we wouldn't be able to be redeemed in our body. If Jesus didn't have a human soul, then our soul cannot be redeemed. Now, if Jesus wasn't 100% God, then he wouldn't have been able to live a perfect life anyways. He wouldn't have been able to do the miracles that he did. He wouldn't be over the angels, the demons, the sin and death. He wouldn't be able to be over all of that. The potential for salvation would be lost without both the divinity and the humanity of Jesus Christ. You need both. And then in verse 20, he's the reconciliation. Peace was made through his blood on the cross. That's where peace comes from. There was a debt on humanity that could not be paid by anyone. Adam couldn't do it. Abraham couldn't do it. Moses couldn't do it. Isaac couldn't do it. Jacob, Joseph, David, Ezra, Nehemiah, all of the prophets. No one could do it, and we still can't do it today. In Revelation, it talks about, is there no one worthy to open the scroll? Heaven or on earth? The Lamb who was slaughtered was worthy. So I'm just going to use an illustration. I don't remember where I heard this. It might have been Wes or it might have been somewhere else. I don't remember. But let it sink in. Imagine that you borrow $10 million from the bank. $10 million. Interest included. And you spend all of it. The only problem is that you make minimum wage. And you could never repay that. So they take you to court. You go to court, and you're convicted of this $10 million debt that you can't pay back. The good news is that your father is in the judge's seat. There's a little hope there, right? There's a little hope. So you're looking at your dad as you walk into the courtroom. You look him in the eyes. He looks at you. And they send you out. You go into the hallway. You come back in. And you're listening. Your eyes are still on your dad, and his eyes are on you. And he raises his gavel, strikes it, guilty. And you start getting taken away. The cops come in, and they start to take you away. And you're getting dragged, and you're sobbing because you know that there is no chance whatsoever that you could ever repay the debt. And your father says, hang on just a second. He stands up, takes off his judge's clothes, comes out from behind his judge's seat. He walks up to the cops and he says, let him go. Take me instead. Jesus paid a debt. Come down from heaven, putting on human flesh, humiliating himself because we couldn't pay the debt. So what do you do about that? What do I do when I go from here with that? The thing that you do is you share the good news. The news that your debt is paid for. That there has been a propitiation for your sins paid in full. Not a drop of sin could escape that. That's what you do with that. Our job is to share. So today we looked at the supremacy of God over creation, the Son over creation. We looked at the Son's supremacy over the church. And we looked at the Son's supremacy over the cross. So I just want to take a couple minutes, to just bow our heads in prayer. And if the Spirit convicted you, I pray that you just have a come to Jesus moment. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes. I'm going to be praying. And then I'll end us up. And if there's anything on your heart that, you want to bring for prayer or anything else, me and Wes will be standing at the front. So take a little time.